recorded live.
This is Don Jaco with Caucus, and today we are interviewing Tim Walberg, who is running for the 7th Congressional District in Michigan. And first off, we'd like to have Tim give us some background and some of his experience for this office and tell us why he's running.
Well, thank you. Tim Walberg here, and the background is that I was a pastor for 10 years before going to the dark side, some say. I ran for the State House of Representatives back in 1982, defeated what now we call a rhino Republican, who was voting for tax increases and other things that really went against our foundational principles. I always thought the oath of office related to the Constitution of the state as well as the federal government. Defeated him in 82 and served in the state legislature for 8 terms during the period of Jim Blanchard and John Engler, his first 8 years of John Engler. Was part of, recognized at that time, part of the No Caucus, who voted very significantly against increased government, taxation, and spending, and for traditional values. When John Engler took office, then we became part of the Yes Caucus in reducing the size, overall cost, scope of government. I co-sponsored and passed 26 tax cuts during that period of time, including Proposal A. And I guess could say we had the opportunity of seeing that when you use the foundational principles, it has a great impact upon the state's economy, and we began to boom again here in Michigan. I was term limited in 1999, January of 99. Spent a couple years as president of a private operating foundation, working on education and community impact issues on the northwest part of Ohio and southeast Michigan, and then spent 5.5 years as the division manager for a divinity school in Chicago, before being asked to run for the seat in Congress. In 2006, I defeated then incumbent Republican Congressman Joe Schwartz, who had voted for numerous spending and liberal issues. Defeated him in the election and went on to win, and spent 1 term in Congress before my re-elect, where Mark Schauer ran against me, and it was during the Barack Obama tsunami that went through Michigan. We lost by 2 points, yet did 10,000 votes better outcome than top of our ticket, John McCain, in the district, and who won the district by 6 points. Decided to consider to run again when we were asked, due to what was going on in Washington, the fact that Mark Schauer was voting 96% of the time with Speaker Pelosi and Barack Obama. Ultimately, last July 14th, my wife and I decided that, yes, with no one else considering running that had any experience, any proven track record, or any certainty of conservatism, we would run again. So we've been running since that time. We have 3 grown children, 3 grandchildren, and a proven principled conservative voting record. So I guess that's probably the basic information I would tell you about myself, and open to your questions.
Great. Well, the first question we'd like to address would be the questionnaire answers that you gave no on. There were 5 of those, and so that gives you a 94% score, and that's right near the top of the score, which means you agree with nearly all the principles of Caucus. So at this time, we'd like to read the question aloud and then have you respond as to why you answered no. First one is question number 21, and it states, because time for public review and input is an essential component of transparency, do you commit to oppose any and all bills, regardless of their merit, if those bills are not posted on a publicly accessible website for a minimum of 1 week while Congress is in session, before either House of Congress is asked to vote on it.
Yeah, and it would have been easy to say that. However, there are times when I truly believe that things may need to move more rapidly, and the fact of holding something off and expectations that people will read it isn't necessarily the case. I think I wrote down there yes and no, depending on the impact of the legislation, its scope, its complexity, etc. Remember, the framers designed our system to expect citizens to do due diligence in selecting their representatives, so there could be an efficient trust factor in expecting those elected representatives to uphold their oath and fulfill their elected responsibility. Citizen and officials have fallen down. All that to say that sometimes the more artificial things we put in, for instance, this PAYGO, we've seen how the other side has been able to effectively talk about the PAYGO requirement and yet totally violate it. I think the key thing for us to really push for as citizens is to get citizens to think very clearly when they elect the elected officials first. It's like term limits. I was not a supporter, speak of term limits. I voted for it. The people's will was there. They indicated that. But all that did was give an artificial approach that really said, citizens, if you make the right decision on someone, and they should be there, and they've been remaining true, arbitrarily we would just kick them out along with the bad ones, as opposed to going to a part-time legislature, which is a citizen legislature. So my concern is that I don't think that buys us anything, especially with the major apathy of citizens to even look at what's going on in the bills. So I guess that's why I said yes or no.
Okay. Well, I guess we feel that they have not followed the principles of transparency, and that's why we need some time to look at these bills before they get passed, so we can make phone calls and impress upon them that they shouldn't vote for it. So that's part of the reason. The other, I guess I have a question. When you said about PAYGO, did you enforce PAYGO when you were in Congress?
Well, I certainly did, but I was a member of the minority, so it wasn't. I didn't have any opportunity to really enforce that. That was being enforced by Speaker Pelosi in the House, and many times we stood up and decried the fact that they were not following their own requirements and the rules of the House that they established for PAYGO. I enforced it only by voting for amendments that would have slowed things down and would have required us to live under PAYGO, and the majority party is always capable of overriding that and going on their own way. That again is why I answered the previous question. We can do artificial things. We can put up all these structures, but if the Congress and the leadership and the majority is not willing, or I guess I should turn it the other way around, is willing to violate, they can violate. That's where keep as much pressure on the people that put the people in office to make sure that they think right the first time through, as opposed to just letting some arbitrary or artificial rule protect them, because it generally won't. In Congress, majority is truly majority. In the state legislature, it was altogether different. There was majority and a minority, but it worked in a much more collegial way and understanding what the rules were, as opposed to the U.S. House, where the rules can change at any point in time by right of the Speaker saying they're going to change.
Okay. Question number 22 is very similar. Do you agree that if and when any amendment to a bill is passed and adds to or takes away from the original text of the bill, that 1 week period should be begin anew before either House or Congress can vote on it?
Well, certainly, if we go to that 1 week requirement, then absolutely yes. But and again, that's why in this question I put yes and no. Yes, it's a great idea, but the fact of the matter is the same as the answer for 21. I think it comes down to, again, that the highest priority is electing the right people on both sides of the aisle that will abide by the rules in place. And I mean, that's why I held over 100 unscreened free town hall meetings while I was in Congress, and 29 unscreened teletown hall meetings, so that I could hear from the people. That wasn't something that was necessarily legislated for me to do. It was a fact that I believe from the Constitution and understanding of what the history is of a member of Congress. They derive their power from the Constitution first and foremost, and secondly, from the majority will of the people that they have been elected to represent. And so again, that's, without going through the whole explanation again, that's why I say yes and no. It'd be great if we could do that, but I do know that an unruly majority, like we have now, Speaker Pelosi, could roll right over that 1 week and have all sorts of backup from a caucus to violate that with no impending doom on her part.
Right. Okay. Question number 25 is similar. I'll just do the last sentence of it. In other words, a 1,000-page bill such as this cap-and-trade bill would require a minimum of public posting of 11 weeks prior to the congressional review and public transparency before it could be voted on. So you said no, and it's probably because of the length of time.
It's a length of time. You know, I think there might become something that is entirely pressing. It could be something dealing with the war. It could be something dealing with our national security. It could be something addressing an issue related to an environmental concern. The spill going on here. If Congress would get its act together and require the president and the executive office to accept the offerings of Denmark and other nations that have come and said, we will help you with the technology we already have in place, and the president has refused. At this point in time, maybe there should be a bill that would go out in a matter of hours. That could be a lengthy bill, or maybe not. So again, my original statement said that bills should be limited in number of pages. They should be, as Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College has told me numerous times, the framers of our governmental system envisioned, like our Constitution, an elegance of simplicity. I think that's a great expression. Elegance of simplicity, short laws, limited laws, simple laws, without a lot of words and a lot of pages, and only as necessary. And I think that's the bigger issue here, that we restrict the amount of laws and we make sure that they are single-issue bills and they are limited in the amount of words in the first place. So it doesn't take 11 weeks to read it.
Right. Okay. 26 is somewhat related, but it brings a new issue in. Do you commit to support to requiring that any proposed legislation contain a summary in plain English of every action and effect on that legislation?
Well, I think I said there no. That could be a liar's tool as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's in relationship to answering something like this, there's a plus of having a track record, an experience, if that's not a bad term these days, experience in what goes on in various parts of government. But I can tell you that there is a creativity in the minds of some of the elected politicians in Washington and their staff people and their attorneys that could make the language that you're talking about fit about any issue where there might be public concern, to allay that concern, and could totally go away from actually what was in the bill. So again, I guess I'm taking the chance of being wrong on the questionnaire for what you wanted to hear, but saying the practical matter is that this can indeed be a liar's tool as well that would lull people into a sense of security that this is what it says in the bill, when in fact it doesn't. So I guess that's why I chose.
Yeah, that's acceptable, and I think the summary of those 4 questions is that you support transparency, but it should be shorter time frames, and it should be up to the legislator to determine the pros and cons of the bill.
Well, yes, but don't forget my main point. My main point is that we need to continue to push the citizenry, the voters, which our framers understood as the people with the power, with the lever of power, which was the ballot box and the First Amendment for dissent, that they would never rely on any artificial tool, good, bad, or indifferent, but never rely on a tool that would supposedly constrain the elected officials to do what they're supposed to do, and then kind of walk away and say, we've taken care of that, as opposed to saying, I'm going to continue to listen, watch, and talk to my elected officials and make sure they understand they aren't getting away. They are under our scrutiny. That again is the danger of I think putting some of these not arbitrary, but artificial factors in, because it really gives a sense of security that, well, we got 11 weeks to look at this. Well, frankly, you and I both know that a lot of citizens aren't going to read that. In fact, the overwhelming majority. The ones that do, thank God for them. Thank God that there'll be talk show hosts, some of them, that will read it. But there are ways still around that without really putting the onus on the voter. Elect the right guy. Force them to answer the questions early on, and then let them know that you're going to be watching day in and day out what they're doing.
That's what Caucus intends to do as we grow and get enough people to be watchdogs. That's what we intend to do. And if legislators do not listen to us when they say they're going to, and if they vote opposite of what they said they were their principles, then we'll work twice as hard to get them out of office as we did to get them in.
That's a worthy goal. That's a worthy goal, and I applaud that.
Yeah. Okay. Last one is 44, and deals with a unified fixed pie budget. Do you agree that both houses of Congress and the President should work with only one budget, the unified fixed pie budget, for the entire annual budgeting process, and that we should no longer have separate presidential, House, and Senate budgets?
Well, we truly only have 2 budgets. The President will offer his proposals, but the actual budgets, as you know, any spending has to originate in the House. But both houses of the Congress, House and Senate, are responsible for that oversight. I think there's a strength, and I think the framers of our way of government saw the strength in that oversight of having 2 houses really hash it out. And to have just a single budget that goes through, I think, again, allows some mischief to take place by the majority. For instance, if we didn't have the Senate right now watching over some of the budget items, no matter how weak they are, yet because there is a very close majority-minority number, they've been able to stop cap and trade in the Senate that was passed overwhelmingly in the House. They were able to put the brakes on the health care plan for a significant period of time, even when the Democrats had the numbers to pass it, because of that check and balance that was there. So I think our framers had it right to a point that I don't want to disagree with them. I think that there really is a value in having multiple looks, multiple views, and then the debate that goes on. I'll never forget Lynn John Bell, who was a liberal Democrat in the State House when I served there. Lynn was from East Lansing, and he made a speech to all of us who were the first term limited class. And I'll never forget the speech. It was titled "The Messiness of Democracy." And he called for us as term limited legislators to go out and continue our involvement in society and continue our involvement in pushing people to understand the value of our system of government was in our laws, was in our Constitution, but was also in something that's intangible but actually happens, and that's called the messiness of democracy. That our democracy works because we are willing to debate. It gets messy at times. We're willing to argue. We're willing to put out different points of views. We're willing to beg, borrow, and steal at times to get support. All this stuff, if followed by the electorate and watched by the electorate and undertaken in a significant way by the members of the elected body, is really the safeguard to keep us from becoming just so unified that we give away everything as well. So that was my perspective in the way I answered there, because I just think that there's value in having that diversity, even in putting a budget together.
Okay. All right. Well, that completes the questionnaire, and I guess we'll just start getting into the questions now, and we'll start with Bill Moylanen.
Thanks, Don. Tim, it's a pleasure to interview you tonight. Thank you for giving us your background, for the service you've provided so far in your career. Where to begin? If elected, what changes do you see need to be made with the tax structure? Short answer question.
I think the simple answer is we need to do away with the present tax code. It is abusive. It's confusing. It's too complex. It destroys our economic growth. It destroys incentive for success. It is just abusive. I think we need to go to a tax structure that is simple, that is fair. It's hard to say any tax is a fair tax. That's my problem with the one problem I have with the fair tax proposal. I don't think it's the right name. Maybe it should be a fair tax. But it has to be simple. It has to be carried out on all people with equity. The flat tax is a great approach, as long as we don't let it become what our present structure is, which began as a flat tax. I think I think to be a basic answer, if you want to follow up, is to repeal the present tax code, simplify the approach, and make it fair so that all people come under the tax.
I think you've answered it pretty well. Thanks. I don't have a follow up.
I've got one since we're on that subject. A flat tax is still an income tax. You're taxing production.
Right.
That makes us uncompetitive compared to other countries. To me, that's the main reason why jobs are going overseas, is because it costs more to produce goods here because of our taxes. If you take taxes off of production, put them on consumption, then the foreigners are paying the exact same tax rate that domestic people are without all the embedded taxes. That's the key difference between a flat tax and a fair tax. So, tell me why you think the fair tax or the flat tax would be better than the fair tax.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
You may know that, or may not know that I was a original co-sponsor of the fair tax when I was in Congress, and I liked it the best for the reasons that you delineated. It was fairer. It was a tax that you had ability to choose whether you paid it or not to some degree. It was not regressive because it had the prebate in place, taking into consideration the basic essentials and necessities of life for all. It charged the drug pusher when he buys his brand new Lexus a tax that he gets away with now. And it also encouraged production in that the tax doesn't come on until the point of first sale. So, no, I think the fair tax is the best approach. And it does away with all of the federal taxes, including FICA, and replaces it with something that is spread over the entire citizenry, plus, as you say, even foreigners who come and purchase first-time goods and services. The flat tax I co-sponsored as an alternative because anything that gets us away from this abusive, confusing, onerous, economy-killing tax that we have right now, complex tax, is a good start. And I tell people, I say, listen, you know, if I were to debate Steve Forbes or Nick Smith, who was a flat tax supporter, we're going to have an argument about the fact that it's dangerous to start this flat tax again because that's how the present tax structure started, and we began getting political and put exemptions and deductions and all sorts of things in it, and it has become what we have now. But for a period of time, have relief and to play a flat 10% tax or whatever, I'd be willing to have that, at least for the relief to get the economy started again. But no, you're right.
I misunderstood you then, I guess, when you initially answered the question, because I thought you were saying a flat tax would be better than a fair tax. So if your position is really that the fair tax is best, but it may take longer or it may be more difficult to explain to people, so it's not going to get enacted as fast, then and then the other is an alternative, then I accept that. So.
Yeah, and of course I was attacked in my last campaign heavily for being the fair taxer in the room. So no, I'm committed to that.
Right. Okay. Well, in your last campaign or the first campaign?
The first and last, but the first one I didn't have a record and I wasn't a co-sponsor. I said I would,
right.
And then when I went to Congress, I co-sponsored it immediately.
Yeah. Okay. But and you know that is a big negative to people supporting the fair tax. I know Pete Hoekstra is having a difficult time. He likes the fair tax, but he comes out and says it. And in fact, somebody just came out with an ad yesterday calling him a tax raiser because he's in favor of the fair tax. So you know they'll use everything they can against you, and I guess you just have to go based on principle and try to combat it the best you can with the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is Paul Hales.
Okay, Tim. I kind of characterize our Social Security system as probably a Ponzi scheme that would make Bernie Madoff blush. Would you support the privatization of Social Security and get away from this Ponzi scheme?
Yeah, when you throw the word privatization out, a seasoned campaigner like me understands that is a buzzword that is just about as negative as a noose hanging around your neck. But in talking with you, we all understand what that means, and I definitely support the privatization of the so-called Social Security system. And my principle would run very much along what Paul Ryan has been talking about, and what even George W. Bush talked about, but so ineffectively, that we would make sure that we establish the fact that those who have been paying into Social Security involuntarily have at least that protection that says we made a promise, even though you and I both know there is no promise in law.
No.
But we have technically made a promise, and we are not going to leave you without hope and without that security, knowing that what is there will be yours. But we're going to say for the incoming workforce, whatever age we put that at or whatever, but basically what we're going to say is we're going to give you an opportunity to opt into a system that's basically a 401k where you're responsible for it and you control it and it's yours and you can pass it on and you can pass it on to your kids or wherever you want to send it, or college or university alumni or whatever. But it is your money and you're responsible to make it grow. All we ask is that you report to us that you're doing that. And if you're doing that, you get the tax break because of your responsibility. And we wish you all Godspeed in achieving success in your 401k plan and your own personal retirement plan, because it's not our responsibility. It's yours, and we applaud you for it. How we do that, I think, is a question. but that's the basics. So, no, I would be very much in favor of saying that there ought to be a date certain when no longer does anybody have to put into Social Security. And recognize the fact, unless you are incapable of caring for your own, and we put a safety net in for those limited few, the rest of you, there are all sorts of helps that are out there. There are plenty of investment advisors. There are all sorts of clear incentives, tax-wise and otherwise, for you to do it, so get it done.
Okay, and one short follow-up here, because I'm gonna assume that the fair tax is in and there is no income tax, therefore tax credits don't mean anything. So could a person basically, on their own volition, not participate in this system, and even a 401k, just say I'm not going to do it?
Well, if the political will is there to say, then if you're not going to do it, you're not going to receive any help from us.
Exactly. Exactly. I've got 1 year to live. All right? I know that, so I'm not going to put into a Social Security system.
Sure. No, I don't have any trouble with that. You see, I believe when I was in the pastorate, we were still able to voluntarily opt out of Social Security. I did, and you had to do it for a religious reason, and I had no problem with that. But I was under the authority, and I was ordained by God to be a minister of the church. And I was not going to put myself in any way, shape, or form under the power, authority, or responsibility of the government. So I set aside my own money. And I didn't pay in Social Security for 10 years while I was in a pastorate. Now, since then, I've not had that choice, and I've had to be paying in since leaving the pastorate back in 1982. I've been paying in Social Security. But if I were given the option as an American citizen, that I could either choose not to do anything and suffer the consequences personally, with nobody being guilty for that or expected to support me when everything went south on me, and I lived more than 1 year, for instance. That's fine. That's fine.
I think it's a violation of the very basic concepts of our Constitution to require people to take their money and put it into Social Security.
Well, I wouldn't debate that with you at all. If you gave me a chance today to go to a 401k plan replacing my Social Security, I'd go to a 401k plan. It wouldn't be because I was forced. It would be because, hey, this is an opportunity for me, and I will do far better than the federal government from here on out. That's for sure.
Oh, it's a Ponzi scheme.
You're right.
That's all it is. All the people that wrote it belong in jail.
Well,
and the Supreme Court that approved it belong in jail.
Right, or they need to be impeached.
Yeah, well, they're dead now. So
yeah.
So now you got to
anyway.
Congress, because Congress could overturn it, but they refuse to do so.
And again, that goes back to who we elect, and we've been pretty lethargic in who we elected in recent years, and I think Barack Obama may have done us a great favor of slapping us upside the head and giving real live illustrations that, hey, this is what happened.
I'm satisfied with the answer, Don.
All right. Well, I'd like to kind of go off on a little deeper, dig a little deeper on that issue. With $54 trillion in unfunded liabilities, we've got to do something about that for Medicare and Medicaid. And there's other unfunded liabilities, in other areas as well as state and local governments that are, exceed $100 trillion. Paul Ryan has a bill, it is a bill, and it's part of his Roadmap for America. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Okay. In it, he, proposes some ways to limit that liability and basically work toward erasing it over time. Are you in favor of those proposals he has?
I am, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I remember going to Paul Ryan in the locker room of the Congressional Jim, and his locker was right near mine. And he had brought this out in the Republican Study Committee the day before his plan, and this was last term. And when I read it, I went to him and I said, Paul, when can I co-sponsor? He said, well, it's not ready yet, but let me tell you something. He said, Tim, I know you're top target in the nation. This would be suicide for you to get on this bill, even if I was offering it for co-signing right now. Frankly, it'll be just a few of us that I will recommend to sign on for the first time we put it up. And it will be people that are generally safe in their district for re-election, because this is just a potpourri and a smorgasbord of opportunity for your opposition to string you alive and have all sorts of perceptions that you want to leave grandma laying in the street with no means of support for anything, and that you're going to rob their Social Security and everything else. So it's interesting that you would bring that up, because Paul Ryan told me, Tim, I don't want you to sign this. At the stage we're at right now, with the $1 trillion deficits that have no end in sight, and the type of government takeover that's gone on, I don't think it'd be as traumatic for me to sign on. I'm not sure that Paul Ryan would even give me that argument or that challenge at this point in time, because I think the American people awaken to the fact that what we're doing is unsustainable. Our Social Security promise is not worth the paper it's written on. Medicare is broke, and everything that's been added to it will add to the quickness of breaking it. So, no, I have no problem with Paul Ryan's bill. It's a great bill.
Okay. I have an idea that I think is original that will help ameliorate the unfunded liability. I'll slightly means test the benefit by saying people over a certain income level, if they have X amount of income, let's just throw a number out there, $50,000 a year or more of income besides Social Security, that you pay them the amount that they paid in plus interest in cash, and they take it and invest it however they like, but they get no more benefits. That would eliminate a huge amount of the future unfunded liability, and it would ameliorate the argument that well, I paid in for all these years, so you're telling me I can't get anything back. That way, everybody's treated fairly, and those people don't lose anything. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Well, I think most of those people would probably take it and run, and would be happy for it. Some probably wouldn't. They'd think it's not as safe and secure, even though if you ask them why do you say that, they couldn't respond. It comes down to the will of the Congress to set aside the funds to do that very thing and get it done quickly. It's not something you can drag out.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think it's better to eliminate the future liability by paying some of that liability initially. So the way we're running up debt, the amount that you'd have to pay out to the people that want to get out wouldn't be that great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, off my soapbox. Next question goes to Bill Moylan.
What are your legislative priorities if you get elected to the House?
The first legislative priority is jobs and the economy, and I think that wraps about everything. Repeal and replace the health care plan. Put in place and fight, as I did when I was in Congress, with a bill that I introduced, both on a health care plan, which became, the ideas in it became the basic centerpiece for the Republican alternative that they brought to the White House, which is a patient-centered health care plan that offered no mandates and offered no tax increases and increased competition through things like the purchase of insurance across state lines, health savings accounts expansion, association health plans, tort reform, set a cap on non-economic damages, and the same type of tax benefit we give to businesses, we would give to individuals and households for purchasing health insurance. That starts to get at the economy. It also gives incentive for people to do what's responsible. It also encourages businesses and allows them to deal with the excessive costs that are there right now, and rather than spending it all on health care, put it into investing for more jobs. On the energy issue, again, we're talking about jobs and economy. We're talking about excessive costs because of lack of independence in healthcare or in energy right now. Businesses pay more for their energy, pay more for the fuel to transport the goods and services. More jobs are lost, less people have incomes, less people put into the revenue stream, either by investment, saving, spending, and ultimately government is even hurt there. So all of those things I would push for, but the tax relief has to be there. I mean, the fact that until we do a fair tax, the Bush tax cuts have to be made permanent. If they are allowed to go out, which looks like they're going to do it, which probably most of us never thought would actually happen, I think it will now. To put those Bush tax cuts back in place is the first step that we have to do, dealing with capital gains, inheritance tax, and that, of course, deals with the common, ordinary individual, not just the rich person. So I think those are the key priorities that I would go to, and it starts with things like not supporting the budget to implement the health care plan. If we don't send the funding to the president, he can't implement it. And if it's not implemented, it's much easier to repeal and replace when we do have the power after the next election and have an administration in place that would sign our legislation. We offer individual bills, simple bills, 5, 3, 6-page bills dealing with each of the components I mentioned, for instance. Offer an associated health plan bill. And get the echo chamber going. Let the citizens start to hear what that actually means for the majority of them who work in small business. Talk about frivolous lawsuits and the need to put a cap on non-economic damages and the cost that will take out of, or the unnecessary cost that will be removed from the system that hurts their employment and job opportunity. We can begin talking about that even if the president won't sign it. The American public are going to hear it. The echo chamber will begin, and then by the time we have a administration in place that will sign some of those laws, the people will be ready for it.
Very good. Thank you.
And let me say one more thing. All else fails, vote against spending increases.
All right. Paul.
I'm going to try to keep my questions to some simple concepts. Would you vote to withdraw the United States from the United Nations?
I sure would. I co-sponsored legislation to do just that when I was in Congress.
Sounds good. I'm done.
All right. Tim, did they have the Republican Study Committee when you were in Congress last time?
Yeah, I was a member of it. It's been in operation for probably 5 or 6 terms. Probably 4 terms prior to me getting there, at least.
Okay. And I understand that it's a group of conservatives that are like a caucus that, tries to come up with, plans that you all can get behind and try to promote.
Yeah, even more than that. It's also an accountability group, because we sign basically, I'll call it a doctrinal statement of conservatism. And if any one of us starts to kind of go off the reservation and consistently vote against those principles, you have contacts made upon you up to and including, if necessary, removal from the Republican Study Committee. They also pay some significant dollars to be part of that committee, which also provides some neat benefits of having the Heritage Foundation and other conservative groups and individuals meet with us on a regular basis. It's a great group. Tom Price is leading it this term. When I was there, Jeb Henserling was the president of the group. Before that, Mike Pence, John Shadegg before him, going back to Sam Johnson and some of the others earlier on.
Okay. No follow-up there. Just go right back to Bill.
I like your sense of priorities. I think you got everything and real good perspective there. Now, the question about the process. You've got your priorities. Who do you draw on? What experts out in the community and the national or in the nation would you use to draw on to make those priorities a reality?
Well, if I'm understanding the question right, the first place I draw on is the Constitution, and without going into great detail because of the lateness of the evening, there were a number of times when I voted, for instance, on a cigarette tax. I never supported a tax in all of my 18 years in elected service, but the cigarette tax was one where some of my conservative friends and colleagues and some ministers would come and say, Walberg, I noticed you voted against the cigarette tax increase. Why? Why would you do that? You're not a smoker, and it's a small group of people. Why don't we help them out by taxing them and then get some profit off it? And I remember saying numerous times when I was in state legislature, Article 1, Section 1 of the state constitution says, all political power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for their equal benefit, security, and protection. That's unequal. And if you can do that to the cigarette smokers, what happens when I say, now you're going to come after me, a blonde, blue-eyed, conservative legislator of Scandinavian descent? It's a small group of people, but the Constitution is for me just as anybody else. Now, that's absurd, but I think that makes the point. So I go to the Constitution. Secondly, I go to the people. And in the process of going to the people, sometimes it's educational process where I have to explain things about what my responsibility as a representative, where the Constitution comes in. And no, it's not because I dislike you or I want to violate your opinion. It's because there are higher priorities in order for us to keep this civil order in place that the framers thought was the way to go. And as Franklin said, the woman who said, what type of government do we have? He said, a republic, madame, if you can keep it. And I think that's where we're at. So communicating with the people, listening to them in the confines, again, of the Constitution, doing an educational process to develop the power whereby I have the punch to go back to Congress and say, I have a certainty that the majority of people, we may be targeted, but the majority of people are standing with me on this. Secondly, or thirdly, I think we go to great organizations like the Heritage Foundation for support, for research, for good talking points. I'm blessed in my district to have Hillsdale College there. For me to sit with Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, and listen to him talk about the elegance of the simplicity of our laws and our Constitution, and having to describe, going back historically, what that means, and understanding what a blessing this form of government is, and what insight our framers had when they put it all together and hassled it out in a messiness that ultimately resulted in this magnificent document called the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. I think that's, if you're asking that, if I'm understanding the question, that's where I go. And that allows me then, even if I'm in a minority as a vote, but the vote that I'm taking is right in relationship to all of those principles, then I can stand firm and have a base by which to call others to that same position.
That was a great answer, and I want to do a follow-up question, and I'm going to take it in a different direction. Do lobbyists figure into your plan, your research for this legislation, or not? And if they do, what groups would you listen to? Who would you interact with?
Well, they play into my interaction and decision making only as much as they want to, and I allow. I tell people, I hope you understand what I say here, I've never had a problem with a lobbyist. In fact, the more, the better. The more viewpoints I get, the more opportunity I have to consider. But it still has to come back to a base. And that's where the Constitution comes. into play. I tell people, don't worry about the lobbyists. Worry about the guy or the gal you elect. If they're suspect in their ability to stand with integrity and say, thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Lobbyist, for the information. I truly disagree with you or I agree with you. Then I'm going to vote based upon what I have been expected to do by my oath of office and the privilege that my electorate gave me to represent them. If that's the case, you shouldn't have a concern about a lobbyist. I've thrown very few lobbyists out of my office. I've listened to plenty, and I've agreed with some and disagreed with some. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I know that it's my responsibility to make the decision, and it's my responsibility to be accountable to my constituents. And and if the Constitution is okay and the constituents aren't, we got a problem, but at least I can look my face in the mirror. If the Constitution is okay with what my decision is and the constituents are okay with me, hey, it's golden.
That was a great answer. Thank you.
Let me just give a very brief answer here. Early on, before I was even elected in my first term in the state legislature, an elected official from Grand Rapids came to speak in the district. He met with me afterwards because he'd read some information. He made my head grow fat by saying, boy, I like what I read. But then he said to me, but how do I know I can trust you? And I gave him a number of answers. None of them were right. And I finally said to him, tell me what my answer should be. And he said, first of all, what are your convictions? And I gave him some convictions. He said, would you die for those? I said, probably not. He said, well, those are opinions. No problem with opinions. But you need to know your convictions. So at any point in time, if there's a question on how you're to vote, you go back to those convictions. If they're not violated, you're probably okay. If they are violated, you better not vote that way. And then secondly, he asked me what my oath of office was. I didn't know what it was. And he asked me if I'd read the constitutions. Make a long story short, he told me, read, memorize key portions of the Constitution. Go back to that. Convictions in the Constitution, if neither violate each other and the process of decision is there, then you're great. and that's the best advice I've ever had.
Boy, really, what great advice. Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
Well, I have a couple really short yes or no questions here. Tim, would you work to end the birthright citizenship in the U.S.?
I had a break up here. What was that question again?
Yeah. Would you vote or work to end the birthright citizenship feature we have in the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, that's done by the courts. That wasn't done by the Constitution. The Constitution, I think, was very clear when it was enacted the 17th that was for freeborn slaves, and it's been carried on by the courts to say it includes anchor babies. No, I would be very supportive of making it very clear that just because you have a baby over here, that doesn't make them a citizen.
So if a Supreme Court justice is in violation of the Constitution, could I encourage you to begin impeachment proceedings?
Well, the first thing you do, as I understand the Constitution, in relationship to the judiciary, and the only requirement that Congress has to establish any court is the Supreme Court, and certain inferior federal courts may be established when deemed necessary. But all of the courts, the justices of the Supreme Court and the federal judges, can be removed from office for one simple thing, and that's for bad behavior. And violating the U.S. Constitution, in my book, is bad behavior. So it means that a guy like me would go to the well of the House and stand and call for the removal of Justice X from the Supreme Court for bad behavior in violating the Constitution under the grounds of whatever article and section. To do that, ultimately, though, I'm going to have to be able to swing enough votes to bring about the impeachment, and that's where the problem comes in. But I think there are more, as I talked with my Republican Study Committee colleagues, there are more and more that are getting to the point that they would be willing to join me in the well of the House and make those same statements and attempt to lobby enough legislators, especially if we get a control in majority by majority conservatives this next go-around.
Okay, and I can accept that, but don't you also send a continuing important message, even if you know you can't get the votes? You make the attempt anyway, and it puts them on notice that from then on, every time you're going to go in there and do it again and again and again. Sooner or later, maybe they're going to start to get afraid that they may lose their job.
You're right. Yes.
So don't take defeat as a reason for not trying.
No, and I think my record will show that I've had plenty of defeats, but we kept trying.
I'm sure of that, and but I'm through with my questioning. Go ahead, Don.
All right. I'm gonna just kind of give you a lightning round of things to see if you would have voted for them. Number one, would you have voted for TARP?
No.
B, stimulus.
No.
90% tax on executive bonuses.
No.
Cash for clunkers.
No.
Even considering that that would have helped for Michigan jobs, even at the expense of job. You know, it was a stupid program. It didn't actually stimulate anything. But
I wouldn't have voted for it. I wouldn't have voted for it.
All right, no case. Okay, that's fine. Would you lead the fight to eliminate earmarks?
Yes. In fact, I have signed on and made statements clearly now that I will not offer earmarks, good earmarks that are justified by the fact that our taxpayers have already paid taxes in to do those very things. But in order to get control, we have to have at the very least, we have to have a moratorium on any earmarks. And I think right now the entire Republican Study Committee has taken that pledge.
And if you do that and you don't get the earmarks, then the senators that are greedy and don't care what their constituents think get them. They're going to get maybe twice as many.
Well, no, that's if if we have a majority, this next go around, we can run amendments to take those out or make sure they're not even put in the first place. And that's where then we go to the bureaucracy and we say we have to argue on our own. We have to argue as individuals representing a district. I have to go to the Transportation Department and Aviation Division, and I have to argue for the fact that because the Battle Creek Airport has the Air National Guard base there with an expanded responsibility, that has Western Michigan University Aviation Flight School there, that has Duncan Aviation manufacturing there, and a number of other things, that we need a parallel runway for safety, as well as having an international trade zone right there. That's the argument I'm going to have to make to the bureaucracy in such a way that I achieve it without having to go through an abusive earmark process, because if it starts with one, you can't end it. And you have a bridge to nowhere that gets in there somewhere.
All right. Now, you said you'd do that if you were in the majority. Now, if you're in the minority, then you don't have any control over that. We've paid our tax dollars in, and then somebody else gets earmarks. How do you justify that?
Well, that's when I tell my citizens, listen, I heard a lot of crying out there about abusive government and $1 trillion deficits. Heard a lot about that. And you elected me because I spoke saying that I was not going to support earmarking, and I was going to put a moratorium on me, even if it was me alone. You elected me. Now you're going to have to stand with me on this issue, because if we break the trust, and the chain is broken, Katie, bar the door. It's going the other way, and it's going to go way faster.
Well,
I mean, that's really the dual partnership relationship that a citizen and his elected or her elected official has to have. And in the dire straits we're at here in this country right now, we have to get control of every area of budgeting, including the earmark system, or as some would call, and I've used the term, legislative directed funding, which there can be some good things. But the abuse that has gone on has caused the people to have great mistrust and disrespect for the process, and I think we have to suffer the consequences right now to change it.
Well, you'll get support from 12,000 members of iCaucus for sure on not taking earmarks. I don't know if you're aware, but Jason Chaffetz, kind of our hero, started the iCaucus basically with his campaign and the offshoots from his campaign managers that started iCaucus from that. He has sworn off earmarks, hasn't taken one, and he stood up, 100% for that. So one has done it, and others are trying to do it. If you're going to join that fight, eventually we'll win.
John Boehner has never offered an earmark.
Is that right? Well, that's good too.
Never. Yeah.
All right. I guess one final question I'd like to ask, and then I'll let the other two ask a final question. Oh shoot! As I was going through that, it just slipped my mind.
We'll come back to you, Don.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Kim, I've got a lightning round. The other two gentlemen had theirs. I've got mine. Okay, short, quick answers. International Monetary Fund. Your comment.
Well, the comment is that in any relationship with international, America should always be in a position of being unilateral in controlling our own destiny, if necessary. I want our economy, our monetary system to be controlled by America alone on sound fiscal policy that causes the rest of the world to envy us as opposed to try to control us.
Okay, second one, Grease the Nation. Not Grease the Musical, Grease the Nation.
Grease the Nation is an example of where we're going and where we'll be sooner than later if we're not careful.
Okay, Green Jobs.
I don't differentiate between colors of jobs. I want jobs, and I don't want the so-called green jobs that cost us more with less benefit than having jobs that are necessary, vital, and perform the function that society will grow and expand upon.
The Internal Revenue Service.
It ought to be abolished.
Bye-bye.
The Federal Reserve.
It has to be audited.
I'm sorry?
It has to be audited.
Audited. Subsidies and bailouts.
Generally wrong.
Like farm subsidies.
Farm subsidies?
Yeah.
Needs to be done away with.
Okay. Fannie and Freddie.
They need to either be privatized or done away with.
Thank you. Great job.
All right.
Pass.
Paul, your final question.
Tim, are you familiar with the I-9 immigration form?
Not specifically, no.
The I-9 immigration form is the form filled out by every employer when they hire a person, any person. And on that form, they have to verify. You're supposed to actually see a person's Social Security card and write their Social Security number down. You're supposed to see two examples of picture ID and document all those examples of picture ID, etc. This is for every employee. The fatal flaw is you don't have to turn it in to anybody. You just put it in their file and keep it. But the law says you got to fill it out, and it's a $10,000 fine or a 5-year, 7-year in a prison term if you don't. But you don't have to show it to anyone. So if you wanted to enforce immigration law, all you have to do is request the businesses to send in copies of their I-9 forms and just compile them. It's obvious our government does not want to enforce immigration law whatsoever. How would you change that?
I think first and foremost, if that is a law to have it, then it ought to be turned in. But secondly, you have to make sure that you have non-counterfeitable identifications as well. We know that Social Security doesn't work that way. They can be counterfeited very easily, and as can be driver's licenses and other picture IDs. there has to be a mechanism by which, and this is where the rub comes, because if we do it for illegal aliens, the next voice will say, well, you have to do it for all employees.
Well, that's what it is. It's done for all employees. That's the law. You have to fill out the form for every employee you hire.
But what I'm saying is the concern with me is that requiring non-counterfeitable documentation of identity gets us into a rub of future shock and the chip with DNA and whatever else will be put on your card to identify the fact that you are truly who you are. That's a creative tension I have. I think that employers ought to be assured that what they get from that employee is true and accurate and not counterfeit, because I don't want the employer to ultimately, when government finds out that this isn't who the person said they were, that then we have an employer who is put at risk of legal action against them. But I'm expressing my concern of how we bring that about, that we have documentation that is true. But the basic premise is, I guess, in answering your question, yes, we ought to turn in that document so that government has it in their hands, and that we ought to have a very clear delineation of responsibility that someone on a regular basis checks those documents to make sure that they are being carried out. And if the illegal alien, for instance, who shows the documentation, the proper green card and everything else, that they are still not here in the United States, but they've gone home when they were supposed to go home, if there was a date for them to go home.
Correct. Or if a guy comes up and he's using there's 17 people using the same Social Security number, you know something's going on. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out.
Yeah, but the government isn't, we've already seen, isn't capable of keeping up with all of that.
We got to hire some really good IP people.
Yeah, I think we have to find some mechanized way to do that with some type of reader that documents it and red flags things, such as multiple IDs for the same person. Because I just know for a fact that the bureaucracy is going to be overrun and overcome with that, especially when the unionized mentality of SEIU and other government employees is what it is. So I think we have to provide security to the employer that when they hire, for instance, my gladiola grower down in Brunson, when he hires the H2A field worker that he's had come up for 27 years to do the same backbreaking work out in the gladiola fields for 6 months of the growing season and harvesting season, that guy, that farmer, knows that when he runs the card through the government-supplied card checker, let's call it, that he is now exonerated from any guilt if for some reason this guy ends up becoming legal because he's done everything he was supposed to do as an employer.
Yeah, I don't know if you maybe misunderstood my comment, but it's written right on the form, the $10,000 fine, but it's only for not filling it out. It's not for making a mistake or for not for getting everything perfect. It's just for failing to fill it out.
Yeah.
So nothing is done with it.
But nothing is done with it.
It's just in a file drawer.
Yeah, that's useless. At least the E-Verify system does some checking, so that has more promise, I think. We have some bills in Michigan legislature to use E-Verify for temporary agencies and some other like construction companies and things where there are a lot of illegals, and I think that's a better system. There's some talk out there that it's not very accurate, but that's a falsehood. It's like 99% accurate because the 4% that don't don't hit on the system are probably all illegals.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
There was a great comment by Newt Gingrich a few years ago when he was talking about this very subject of identification, and he said, The problem is the government will spend millions of dollars to try to develop their own system and hardware, when basically the technology is already in place with ATM machines and bank cards. You can go to China and you can put your card in an ATM machine in a matter of seconds. You get money. How much more secure can it be than that? Why not have the bank, the American Express and Visa and MasterCard technology people develop a system for the U.S. government? Just seems to make so much more sense.
Yeah, or do what Brown or FedEx does with their boxes, where they know where they're at anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
Okay, final question. In order to change this ship around 180 degrees, get back to limited government, we're going to need leaders. Are you going to be a leader in Congress?
Well, I think I can answer that by saying we have been, and that's why I was targeted number one in the nation for defeat. And more independent expenditures were spent to defeat me last time than any other targeted candidate in the nation. I think that said that Nancy Pelosi and the liberals over there didn't want Tim Walberg standing on the floor of the House or in committee or going back to the people or in the news media and speaking the truth on issues and taking the leadership alongside of some great leaders in the Republican Study Committee. And that's where we found our greatest impact. But no, absolutely. But I'm a leader under orders, and the orders come from the Constitution and the people I represent.
All right. Well, let that be the final word. It was a good conclusion, and thank you, Tim, for being forthright with all your answers. I don't think we stumped you at all, and I think you were giving us the straight scoop. So thank you very much.
Bless you, Tim. It's been an honor to interview you tonight. Thank you for your answers and your candor and your clarity. Good luck with your campaign.
Thank you. So far, so good. We'll talk to you later.
All right. We'll be
Good
in
luck
touch.
too, Tim.
Yep.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bill, are you still there?
I think Bill, guys, he's fast getting off, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Man, are we still being recorded?
Yeah, let me cancel that.